The mules are in the corral. Welcome to Mule Talk, and I'm Cindy K. Roberts, your host. This week's guest on Mule Talk is Meredith Hodges from Lucky 3 Ranch. And we spoke before last month, and we had a power outage. The interview was so explosive that we had a power outage. So now we're gonna pick up where we left off. Meredith, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, you bet. It's fun to do this.
Now, before the lights went out and everything just got fried, let's talk about what you have seen in the mule industry or the mule world from way back in the 1980s. What was your experience like?
Actually, it was even further back than the 80s. I got started in 1973 on my mother's Windy Valley Ranch back in Healdsburg, California, and I was introduced at that time to the American Donkey and Mule Society that had begun in 1967. And in 1967, there were declining numbers of mules in the country with the onset of the industrial age. There were no more uses for them since the tractors came in and everything. And so their numbers were declining. And I think there was pretty close to only 10,000 mules in the country at that time. And when I came on the scene in 1973, I had been working with Arabian horses, and I was 23 years old when I started with mules. And I thought what everybody else did, that they were stubborn, hard to deal with and everything. And I had no real inclination to do anything with them, but my mother needed a trainer and somebody to help out at the ranch, and so I told her that I would go ahead and do that. So I got to the ranch, and I was cleaning the barn and working with the colts, and she produced about 30 colts a year. And at the same time, I went ahead and joined the American Donkey and Mule Society out of Denton, Texas, so that I could get more information about them. And I decided quickly that they were a pretty amazing animal, and they were quite capable of doing anything and everything recreationally that horses were doing. So I made it my mission to train the mules that I was exposed to go ahead and do all these different recreational things, starting with gymkhana, running barrels and poles and flag races and all those fun events. At the same time, the American Donkey and Mule Society was being established as the national organization and the National Registry. And so we were writing a rule book back then for donkeys and mules. But in each different area, we found that different people did different things with the mules. And there weren't a lot of judged events, but there were a lot of gymkhana events and games that people played with them and things that they did with them, like coon jumping and raccoon hunting, and things like that. And so we incorporated those kinds of things with general rules into the rule book that we were writing and kept things really general with the understanding that each area could write the details in their own rule books for their own individual areas as they saw fit. And that way we could keep the umbrella American Donkey and Mule Society there to kind of structure things a little bit for the industry. And so we spent a lot of years doing that. And when we got into judged events and people started doing, English and Western pleasure and Western riding and things like that with them, then we had to really think hard, because one of the things I remember that was really humorous was writing the donkey pleasure class rules. They said that, well, we really shouldn't have a rule that you have to canter in the adult Western pleasure class. And
What?
I said, why not?
Really?
Yeah, why not? And they said, oh, because donkeys don't canter. And I said, well, haven't you seen them cantering out in the pasture? And they said, yeah, but when you put a rider on them, they won't canter. And I said, well, isn't that really just a training issue? and they said, yeah, but we can't get them to do it. And so that prompted me later on in the 1980s, when little Jack Horner was 3 years old in 1983, I was training him because he wanted to do everything the mules were doing. And this was a perfect opportunity to show what donkeys could really do. And so I got him to walk and I got him to trot, but he really didn't want to canter. And so I thought, well, you know what? The thing about donkeys and mules and training them is that you have to make them think it's their idea.
Right.
And then you can pretty much do anything you want if you're clever enough to figure out how to do that. So when I was training this Jack to canter, I put the mares at one end of the hayfield and I took him to the other end of the hayfield and pointed him at the mares and said, "You want to go see your girls?" And I just let him go. And darned if he didn't start cantering and then galloping and running to his mares. And he was very happy. And so we kind of did it that way. And I just, after a while, after he got to do it really easily, then we would just do circles on the way to the mares. And so that's how I got him to do that. And then I was trying to train him how to jump because he was a go-getter, and I wanted to see if a donkey could jump. And so I took him out on my jump course, and I started over low cavaletti. Well, he really didn't want to pay attention to what I wanted to do. And I had all kinds of different size jumps on that jump course. And he went over the little cavaletti, and then he took off with me. And he went over the 2-foot jump. Then he went over the 2-6 jump. And then he went over the barrels. And I just rode it. Well, there's no point in pulling on the reins because he's going to do what he wants to do anyway.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of how I got started, and I slowly worked the cues in, and I started figuring out that, trying to make them do anything by any kind of force at all just wasn't going to work.
Right.
So getting back to all those different events, that's kind of how I approached it with mules too, is that I just kind of assimilated what I wanted from them and then let them do it. And I tried to apply a lot of horse training techniques, but I found that when I got too bullish about it, I usually got dumped off or run away with. And I thought, well, this isn't working very well, and so, but, I was learning and I was willing to learn. I kept an open mind, and I decided that really, if I wanted my history lessons correctly, if I read my history lessons correctly, that there were people way back in history that got along with mules very well. And those were people who were very patient and worked with them and not against them. They didn't try to force anything with them. And anybody who did was a trainer that did not have much success and then perpetuated the same myths about mules, that they're stubborn, they're hard to work with, you got to hit them with a 2x4 to get their attention. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think so.
Right.
My grandmother gave me the best advice ever. When she told me, she put a book on my head one day, and she said, "You're going to be a very sorry old woman if you don't learn to walk in good posture and use good manners." And those words just rang in my head for the rest of my life, and they are the foundation of my approach with the donkeys and mules after learning horse training techniques. The other thing was that I found about the horse training techniques was that when I was trying to use them, I read a lot of books and everything, but they were by different authors and different levels of training, from full training to lunging to ground driving to all of these different things that you want to incorporate in your training program. But they were all written by different authors and done different ways. And by the time I got to a slow and sequential way of training, I was reading books by Colonel Alwa Podolsky from the Spanish Riding School of Vienna and Klemke in dressage, and I found that those books were way over my head. I didn't understand half of what I was reading back then.
Yeah.
And so I thought these were different things, that people did and everything. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice? And of course, there were no training books on mules and donkeys. none. I mean, there was military guidelines,
Right.
and farming guidelines, but nothing that really was logical and sequential and easy to follow or anything like that. So I decided that that was what I was going to do. I was going to go ahead and try to train these guys to do everything the horses did, and I was going to put it in a diary and write about every experience that I had. And so that's what I did. And I even employed a dressage instructor later on, after I had gone through English and Western pleasure and Western riding, and even got into some reining. And we introduced reining to Bishop Mule days after Pat Pirelli had shown bridleless reining with one of the mules that he bought from my mother.
Oh.
And that kind of got interested, going around for reining with mules. Granted, when he put the bridle on her, she ran off with him in the class. She didn't want to be told what to do. And, but that's okay. We've all had those kinds of experiences and everything. Yeah. So Pat's focus went more to the horses, and he's always been very good with them. Mm-hmm. But I think, Pat said way back then, too, that horses should be trained the way that mules must be trained. And mules must be trained with a polite and considerate attitude. They need to be asked what to do and then allowed to respond. And that's what I've discovered over time. And I've gotten, the training has become a whole lot easier that way. And I see people these days doing all of the different things that I did. And I even got into dressage and combined training. I trained the first mule ever to reach 4th level dressage. And then I took another mule into combined training. I was inspired by Meredith Farm's Kit and Edith Conyers, she had invented her mule. And so I was inspired by her and took my mules in. And in 1993, my combined training mule won the horse trials down at Abbey Ranch Horse Trials against 56 horses in dressage. She got the highest score.
Wow.
And so I was just amazed that I was able to teach them to do all this stuff. But it was because I had to use a polite and considerate, way of dealing with them to get all these different things from them. And then writing about them all, I started out in 1982 by writing articles that appeared in 25 different papers internationally, and about all these experiences I had, training experiences, just general psychology stuff and history and all of that. And in 1993, I published my first book from a lot of the training articles that I had written. And so that one was Training Mules and Donkeys, a logical approach to long ears. And it was the first book that kind of went in some order. But then in 1997, I found that it was a little bit of an overview, and it had a lot of good stuff in it for people. And I've been told that people consider it the long ears Bible. But I knew that they needed more detail, so I produced the 10 videotape, or DVDs now. They were VHS tapes when I started, Training Mules and Donkeys series, and 1 through 10, and began with foal training. Then I went into preparing for performance, groundwork. Then I went into driving, and then under saddle, and intermediate, then advanced, then jumping, and then a general video about management, fitting, and training, and then 2 tapes about what donkeys do a little differently than horses and mules do. And each one of those tapes represents a year's worth of training. So you've got about 8 years of training in there, plus the extra stuff with the donkeys. And so that went on for a little while, and then I realized there wasn't really enough management information in that, so I wrote my book, A Guide to Raising and Showing Mules, which also includes donkeys and horses. But it's a lot of management stuff about breeding, about foal care, mare care, about general care, diseases, aging animals by their teeth, hoof care, dental care, and all the different things that aren't really specific to training.
Right.
And then people said, well, I like the DVDs and everything, but it's kind of hard to go in and watch the DVD if you're out with your animal and then you want to go back and find out what is that on that DVD, And then at that time, too, I was drumming up a lot of international clients. And so I wanted to put those DVDs into foreign language, but that would have been very expensive to do that. So what I did was I developed 2 manuals, one called Training Without Resistance that represents videotapes number 1 through 7, and Equine Management and Donkey Training that includes tapes number 8 through 10. And I published that manual, and then I published it in French, German, and Spanish, and English.
Wow.
So that, and I made the videos so that they could be internationally played, so people could actually watch the video and read along in their own language, and it was the script, word for word, was in the manuals, with a lot of additional information that was mentioned in the videotapes, but wasn't really done in much detail. I've got an appendix in there with all the patterns that I used. When we got into combined training, how they built the jumps and what kinds of knots they used to tie those things together so that they would break away if an animal landed on them. The conversions from the metric system to our number system, just all kinds of stuff that I knew that people would need, all this information. And it's an ongoing learning experience. I mean, I had no idea, a lot of people just put out 1 or 2 books or 1 or 2 videos and they're specific to different things. But I find that a lot of people really enjoy being able to get all of these different details. And the way I feel about knowledge is that, when families were growing up together in the old days, the elders would sit around and tell stories to the younger people about the things that they'd learned in their life. I've always felt like knowledge was something that should not be sold. It should be shared for free, and that you should pass down the information that you learn as you're going through life. And so that's basically what I'm doing with the products that I do. And I even wrote a series of children's books called Jasper the Mule, because it occurred to me that children need to learn these things as they're growing up too, and they learn in a more cartoony way, and so I wrote these books, and they have a little bit of history in them. They've got a lot of training information on how to get along with your animals, and so I came out with those. And then in 2009, people were using my methods, and then they said, well, why am I doing all these exercises this way? And so, what's different about your program in relationship with, the natural horsemanship that so many people are using now? And so I came out with Equus Revisited, which explains how you can get a really good response from your animal by using natural horsemanship techniques. But the one thing that you cannot do is develop good posture in a quadruped without using a bit in their mouth and a mild postural restraint like mine that I use, which is called the elbow pull. It allows full range of motion in the animal, but it restricts them from raising their head too high and hollowing their back and their neck. And posture is something that needs to be practiced and developed. It's not anything that any of us, human or animal, are born with.
So in a way, if you can put it in these terms, you're developing their core strength, because we talk about our core body strength. So it's
exactly right. Yes. And people misconstrue what core strength is a lot of the time. They see the muscle that they're building on their animal, and most of them do it while they're riding. You cannot build core strength that way. If you look at the way that humans build core strength, they do it with exercises like Pilates that are very slow. They're very deliberately done, like laying on your back on the floor and raising your legs and lowering your legs very slowly. And that addresses not just the musculature, but it also addresses the tendons, the ligaments, the soft tissue, and the wear and tear on the cartilage that supports the bones. And that's what core really means. And you can only address the core by doing leading exercises properly and by encouraging self-body carriage in the animal so that all of those elements are developed symmetrically around the bones. When we get on and we just ride, we develop the core asymmetrically and cause compromises in the body. And thus we get uneven wear and tear in the joints that causes arthritis. And the internal organs start to fail because there's uneven pressure on them. And so this stuff has to be done in a slow, meticulous way. It takes a long time of these groundwork exercises to really develop a strong core. And it must be done repetitiously, and it must be done in a way that encourages the animal to symmetrically walk straight. So when you're leading them, for instance, you don't want to hold the lead rope in your right hand because if you're standing on the left side, because if you do, every step you take causes your hand to move. It's attached to their head and their neck, and their head and their neck swings ever so slightly back and forth, and it pulls them off balance. So what I do is I hold the lead rope in the left hand and leave the lead rope loose across my belly. I point in the direction of travel with the animal, have with their head at my shoulder. I say their name. I ask them to walk on. I look down and see what foot they're leading with and their front feet. And I go ahead and match my steps with theirs exactly. And then when I want to stop, I go and to prepare them for a command. And then I say, whoa. And I stop with my feet together. Then I turn to their shoulder, and undoubtedly they don't stop with their feet together. So I go ahead and I square them up every single time I stop. Now, the other thing that I do too is that this behavior has to be rewarded. Nobody works for a pat on the head. They
Right.
need to be paid well for what they do. And I need something that they're willing to work for consistently that they won't get tired of. And that happens to be crimped oats. And the crimped oats are very healthy for an equine.
Yes, they
And
are.
they're getting the energy, the quick energy from the crimped oats while they're working. I don't feed them very much on their daily, oats mix. I only mix the vitamins in there, the showed well and the Mazola corn oil in their oats, which is usually no more than 1.5 to 2 cups of oats for an average sized animal, and it's only a 1/4 cup for a mini, and double that for a draft. But then that's just to get the nutrients to them, and then I feed those at night because I keep my animals in a dry lot so I can monitor their weight, and so they get turned out for monitored turnout time. And I want them to come in when I call them. I don't want to chase them for anything, not for any reason whatsoever. So when I have them out, and it's time to come in for supper, I just go to the gate and I say, "Come on in, it's time for supper." And they all come in because they know that I've got the oats waiting for them in the bin. And I get cooperation, and I get them to stop running away from me when I want to go get them to train by only feeding grass hay in the morning. And then I go to the gate or the stall door and I go, "You want to go for a lesson? Come on." And they go, "Nah, I don't think so." And they start walking away from me. And then I've got this fanny pack full of oats. And I'll stand there and I'll shake it. And I'll go, "I think you forgot. I got the fanny pack, and guess what's in it?" And they all turn around and they go, "Oh, that's right. She's got the fanny pack, man." And they all come running. And of course, you can get bombed by a bunch of animals, when they figure that out. But that's where boundaries come in. They need to know their boundaries.
Right.
And there has to be a way to, deal with an aggressive behavior like that. And they're 1,000-pound animals, and if they get too aggressive with me over those oats, then I just take the flat of my hand and I smack them upside their lips, up the side of their lips where there's no teeth. It just kind of stings and catches their attention, but it doesn't really hurt. And then I immediately turn my hand over in front of their face like a stop sign, and I go, no, back up. And of course, they roll their heads back and they go, oh my God, you hit me. And I, at that very moment, I don't let seconds pass. When I reach in my fanny pack, I take a step forward and I go, thank you for giving me my space. And they take a double take and they go, oh, she's giving me the oats now. And they stop and they wait where they are. And I go, yes, thank you for giving me my space. And then I give every single one of them something for backing up and being nice about it. And if I do it right the first time with them, I'll never have to slap them again. All I gotta do is just put my hand up like a stop sign and say, no, back up.
That's good.
And they will do that.
Huh.
They will definitely do that. And so it makes it really nice because when Mom comes to the gate and says, who wants to work? I get everybody. They all want to go. And I've never had a problem with them being herd bound. If I have animals that are difficult to get away from the barn, to go to the training area or anything like that, I will just take their friend with them. And I'll do training on 2 at a time. And I'll take them both to the training area. I'll take them both to the grooming area, groom them, take them both to the training area, tie one to the fence while I'm working the other one and swap them out. And then when they discover that I'm not going to deliberately separate them from their friends, then they're more willing to leave their friends, because the other thing is they know that they only spend a short amount of time with me, and then I put them back with their friends. I don't separate them from their friends or punish them, for behaving that way, being herd bound. I just want to be as good a friend to them as their other friends are, and I kind of look at it like that.
That's interesting.
It works.
Wow.
It works wonders, and it greatly reduces resistant behaviors like running off. When you're doing things and they both see that they're both working and leading training, and one's standing by the fence and the other one's working in my hourglass pattern is what I use, because it's a good pattern to balance them to both sides. The internal pendulum swings back and forth. So doing straight lines doesn't always work. When you school an animal on a rail, for instance, their balance tends to lean away from the rail. And it's an optical illusion, but nevertheless, it has a physical impact on their bodies. And so then they start to lean to the inside. And the same thing happens, and you can see it most often in the round pen. If you start your animals in the round pen, you'll see that they start going around, and their first impulse is to go really fast. And then when they do that, they lean like a motorcycle. So you don't want to do that. And what I do is I will spend 3 to 6 months on leading training in this hourglass pattern to build that core symmetrically by walking in sync with them, by stopping periodically between cones and squaring them up, by leading from both sides, all of these different things. People are often afraid of pattern training, but patterns can be helpful, and patterns can help shape behavior and the way that an animal moves physically. And so with the repetition of this hourglass pattern, it changes their natural way of moving to a more correct postural way of moving that over time becomes their habitual way of moving. And if you're willing to spend that time, then you're building that core. And when you build it right, it lasts for a long time in between workouts, before you have to tune it up or anything like that. Because every time you let your animal out, after that core movement becomes habitual, they're moving in good posture, so they're actually reinforcing it themselves in turnout. And the easiest way to tell if one needs a little bit of work, a reminder, if you will, of their postural way of moving, is just watch them when they're at rest. because an animal that has a good, strong core that is symmetrically built will actually rest four square.
Yes.
They will not have their feet. They will not have their feet splayed. They will not be dropping a hip and cocking a foot. You know.
Yeah.
Sore animals do that. Animals that are sore in their back will do that.
Yes.
And so, you know, and you got to think about these things too, in terms of how do we actually address our human athletes? You know, they go out, they don't just go out and play the game and build up muscle with the muscle groups that are used in the game. They have to prepare for the game by doing exercises that address all the muscles in their body. So if they accidentally have to use some other muscle group in the game that's not normally used, they won't hurt themselves. And we don't do that with our equines. We just get on a ride. We look at them and we think, oh, they're really big, you know, so they can carry little old me, no problem. But as you well know, you know, put a lightweight backpack on yourself and walk for 25 miles and see how you feel the next day.
Right.
You know, you might be able to do it that day, but you won't feel good the next day.
That's all true. And I've got to compliment you because you have truly made a difference in the mule world. And as far as adding details to the training programs, and you've made us think about why we need to apply these exercises to our equines. So you really have done so much for the mule world. And I've told you this before, Meredith, we need to clone you.
Well, you know, I'll tell you what, I think I'm being cloned every day by the people that take my stuff seriously and put it to work themselves, because I have seen the quality of the mules increase exponentially over the years. The performance, ability, and the way that it's done has just skyrocketed. We got mules into dressage out at Bishop, and now for the last 4 years, we've had our mules competing in the United States Dressage Federation finals in Lexington, Kentucky, and they're doing an amazing job.
Wow.
So, you know, I have to give credit to these people that are coming up in our industry that are serious enough to take this seriously and to use what I have and help these mules to shine where they were the most maligned critter on the planet. You know, everybody makes jokes about mules and donkeys, but not anymore.
That's
you
right.
Know, you start watching them and their people, and it brings tears to my eyes to see, you know, what's happened with all the work that I've done, and it's certainly made it worthwhile. And thank you so much for recognizing me for all of this. And there's other people too. It took us 18 years with Carol Sweet, Leah Patton, and me, and Marsha Arthur. We all worked on getting mules accepted in the United States Equestrian Federation. And like I said, I started it in 1986, and we finally got them into the dressage division in 2004.
That is truly, truly awesome. So Meredith, thank you for coming on the show. Where can people find you? I mean, you have a website.
Yeah, my website is at www.lucky3ranch, all spelled out, not the number 3.com. You can write or email me at Meredith, MEREDITH, at lucky3ranch.com. You can go to my Facebook page at Meredith Hodges, public figure. I am sorry to say my friend's page is maxed out, but I always post exactly the same thing in both places so that nobody will miss anything. And you can also call us on the phone at 1-800-816-7566.
All right, Meredith, thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, and good luck with your podcast.
The perfect gift for your mule friends is Metal Art by Sandy. Sandy has captured the beauty and unique style in all of her metal artwork. Sandy carefully handcrafts your metal art to the likeness of your mule, donkey, or horse. Orders are promptly created by Sandy, wrapped, and then shipped. Want a ranch sign crafted for your driveway or barn? Metal Art by Sandy. Go to metalartbysandy.com. Metal Art by Sandy is also on Facebook. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or a sponsor, send me an email, Cindy, C-I-N-D-Y, at everycowgirlsdream.com. Gotta go. My mule is looking for me.